Hello, Mark Lanier with your video thought for the day. So I'm sitting here in front of one of my favorite paintings. This painting's entitled Newsstand of the 20th Century. And it's a typical New York City newsstand with an exception. Instead of having all of the current magazines, it's got a selection of magazine covers from notable events of the 20th century. So you've got Ronald Reagan, clearly not alive today, and he's next to Babe Ruth and John Wayne and Frank Sinatra. You've got Michael Jordan. You've got Elvis and Princess Di. You've got the headline of Kennedy being assassinated, along with Nixon resigning, along with all sorts of other news items. The disaster of the Hindenburg, Churchill declaring victory. Change is constant around us. We know that today more than maybe at any other time, and certainly in my life. But it reminds me of the Gospel of Mark. And I love the way Mark bookends his Gospels with two passages that if you're just reading through, you may not realize the import of the second passage, because by the time you get to it, you've already forgotten the first one. Let's look at them together. At the very beginning of the Gospel, in chapter 2, Jesus is being questioned by the Pharisees on why Jesus' followers don't seem to fit into the mold of what the Pharisees thought they should be doing, how they should be behaving. And Jesus uses an analogy. He says, you don't take an old washed piece of clothing, a garment, and take a brand new unwashed piece of fabric as a patch. Because what will happen when you wash it is that new piece that you used as a patch will shrink and it will tear the old garment. Jesus then adds, you don't put new wine in an old wineskin. It'll burst the wineskin once it starts fermenting. But that garment being torn is very important, because at the end of the gospel, when Jesus is being delivered over to be crucified, the high priest is examining Jesus and asking Jesus whether or not he's really claiming to be divine. And upon hearing the response of Jesus, the high priest, who represents the epitome of the current system, tears his own garment, because Jesus is that new, fresh understanding and event that will rip apart any old vestige of something that's out of date. Now, what does that do to us as readers of the Gospel of Mark? It gives us a very clear understanding that God is always current. Whatever God is doing in the moment is today. God is not some rickety old man with some rickety old system that's out of date. God is as current as tomorrow. And that's true every day there is. And so as a believer, when I look at the sea of change that is coming in this 21st century, I do it holding fast to the God who is always current. And I'll know I never need to worry about my garment being ripped because of my failure to accept the ever-present, ever-modern, ever-current God. And that, my friend, is your video thought for the day. In the sea of change, hold on to the constant God. I'll talk to you tomorrow.